All right, joining us now, we have a really special guest, someone who's very, very important to me, a dear friend and great hockey writer, managing editor of the Hockey News Women's and author in his own right. It's Ian Kennedy. And today we want to just chat with him about the PWHL, but more importantly, women's hockey just in general. So welcome on in, Ian. We're so happy for you to join us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk about women's hockey with you. So I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, let's just mention so in case folks haven't seen the word out there, your new book, Ice in Their Veins, kind of a narrative history of women's hockey as far back as you could trace it, I think it is.
Mhm.
How could you describe that for us?
Well, it is. I mean, there hasn't been a women's hockey book put out about the history of it, at least, aside from autobiographies and individual stories for probably 2 decades now. And a lot's happened, and a lot of the history that was available has become a little bit more accessible. So this is really a deep dive into how women's hockey got to where it is today, but also the struggles and the challenges that have faced women historically, the ties between sport and society, and the barriers that were there, and the exclusion of women from all facets of life, not just from hockey, but using hockey as kind of a lens for that through to some of the really important and unknown or untalked about events and people in hockey history that I think if we all took a moment to learn about them and their fascinating stories and the challenges that they faced compared to, the stars on the men's side that we know, we would really feel even more incredible about where we've got to with the PWHL, and we'd feel inspired to kind of find ways to celebrate these women, because they deserve it. And it's almost criminal that we haven't talked about women's hockey history to any regard compared to men's hockey history, which is all that we've really been told. We've only been told men's hockey history. So any book that before this called itself a hockey history book was a really an impart or an incomplete story of that history. So I'm really glad to put it out there. I'm really glad to see the reaction from many of the women that were in this book that I
Mhm.
interviewed for it, that told their stories. They've just been so excited to finally be part of the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does tie in well with I know the launching of the PWHL is kind of where you left off because you just wanted to tell the story up until then, and now it's taking on a life of its own, and we're certainly getting a lot of coverage, of course, including the Hockey News, where I'm a contributing writer, and I'll encourage folks to visit the Hockey News Women's site, where there's a lot of coverage, not only the PWHL but international, college, smaller leagues, and notable athletes that are playing all across the globe. And thank you for saying what you have. As we both know, and probably listeners who are fans of the PWHL and women's hockey in general know that it has been kind of underserved and under discussed. And there's a little bit coming out now because of the shoulders that the women are standing on now. But in your own opinion, like you just said that any hockey history has been somewhat incomplete. So like why is it important, and how can we catch up? Knowing that most people now will know Hilary Knight and Marie-Philippe Poulin, and they'll start to know some of those names, but like why is it important, and how do we manage to keep the stories of older generations and people who came before alive and well?
Well, I think a lot of people believe that women's hockey history kind of started with the Cami Granados and the Angela James and the Haley Wickenheisers of the world, but there were people that, you know, led the way to get there, to make sure that there were world championships, to make sure that women's hockey was in the Olympics. And that movement started in like the 1930s. We're not talking about this in the 80s. It was ongoing for a century, and women's hockey itself was played in front of thousands and thousands of fans in the early 1900s, like 1905 and beyond that. The 1930s was an incredible decade of women's hockey, but the importance of knowing that and knowing about the misogyny and the sexism and the lack of ice time, the lack of funding, the complete banning of women from many aspects of sport, the creation of games like ringette that were, quote unquote, more gender appropriate for women. There's been this active movement to keep women out of hockey, and we kind of need to know that history because we're building this brand new league right now that is incredible, filled with so many talented athletes. Girls across the globe are finally being able to see women's hockey accessible on television. They see a future in it now, but the game got here because of a lot of people that we have no idea about.
Mhm.
And ignoring the decades and century of struggle that went before this and just kind of focusing in on the last 5 years from when the PWHPA and the PHF were really working towards pro leagues. That is a disregard for the truth. It's a disregard for um, of the issues and knowing why the issues became what they did and how they stayed enforced for so long, and the role that people like myself, men that played hockey or have been involved in hockey, have had in excluding women. And we can't fully forever fix these issues so that the PWHL can thrive and young girls can thrive in the game until we fully understand the very long history and all the different, uh, some minute issues, some incredibly large issues, but they all added up to this thing where, people didn't think that a women's league could survive and succeed. And look at the success it's had with filling arenas all over the place. So it's just, if you don't know the mistakes of the past, you're doomed to repeat them, I guess, is part of the issue. And um, it's also wrong to forget these women. Men are in the Hockey Hall of Fame all over the place for far lesser successes and achievements than the women that have been completely forgotten. And that's wrong. And I think it's really important for not just young girls to see themselves represented and to see their history in the making, but also for older women to see the stories of successful hockey players from the 60s and 70s and well before that, back into the 20s. And, it's so important for other people to see that women have existed in hockey forever.
I was able to grow up um, playing hockey in the Mississauga Girls Hockey League from the age of 7. And I believe it was the first girls only hockey league. Again, that magic number, 4 teams. And the Canadettes tournament in Brampton was a big part of that, and then was able to participate off and on. I also played at Queens, but that era, I think there are people from that era that really, really appreciate the league now, but also appreciate being seen for what you just said, things that weren't available to us. And I'm not, even going far back into the 50s and 60s when things were probably much worse, but it hasn't been it hasn't been a long standing time that things have been pretty good for women's hockey. I have some not good stories of things that were allowed to happen and not good treatments that happened. So, without making people uncomfortable or anything, but what can you say to that, and what we even see now on social media and what we hear about female broadcasters, and you can make your own list, and please do follow Ian on any social media, and myself as well. I happen to retweet and repost a lot. There'll be something that just catches fire online that is just so disappointing, and I don't want to focus on that, but how do we wrap that into all the feel good stories right now?
Well, we need to celebrate first and foremost. I think that's a portion of you can look at any community or group of people that have faced oppression or discrimination, and right now there's a lot of negative, and it's really important to show excellence as well and to celebrate these incredible women and the builders that are there. But the history like you said, it shows otherwise. And it's not a history of the past, right? It's still ongoing where girls programs are fighting for ice time. They're fighting for proper funding. Um, I mean, I coached girls hockey for 10 years and I was shocked when I came over from coaching boys AAA to girls hockey to see the differences. I mean, we were playing shorter periods of time compared to boys at the exact same level. So why was the ice time less? And we always got the last choice of scheduling for practices and games. And our transportation, I mean, we had this bus that was shared in the organization, and the boys always got the best of that. And, we were always kind of jamming things into every place that we could or stacking people on top of bags and bags on top of people. And it's not a history of the past. It's still very much ongoing. And you can see that online where people men in general lash out at any kind of celebration of women, whether it's broadcasters, whether it's the players themselves, the league. There's always these questions that never exist on the men's side. Even the failure of past leagues, the fact that the PWHPA and PHF came from the NWHL and the CWHL. People see that as a failure of women's hockey when it's just a natural evolutionary step. Nobody questioned the viability of the NHL after the WHA amalgamated with it. Men's sport was viewed very differently. And so we are in this era of misogyny and this hyper masculinity being celebrated where um, you can be a very masculine person and still love women's sports. I mean, I love women's sports for a variety of reasons, and I love covering women's sports more than anything because the athletes are incredible. They're highly educated people that are going to give you far more insightful and in-depth commentary. And there's a lot of story about them as people that, they're interested in so many other things because sometimes they've had to be with the lack of pay and things like that. And that is still a problem in the PWHL. I mean, we can't gloss over the fact that at least 50% of this league are not making livable wages. They still have to go back at the end of the season and work another job or um, plenty of different things just to make a living. They have to, the day after the season's done, they go back to a different job to pay their mortgage. That is the life that people are leading. There's no development system. So if you don't make it right off the bat, your career could be over. And we've got all these issues that this is the start of a resolution, but it's also the start of decades more of hard work to um, change people's perspectives and to challenge how people viewed the sport. I've challenged a lot of, and that's one of the things I do in the book is kind of put myself into some of the chapters um, to reflect on my own participation in misogynistic practices or systems that oppressed women in hockey and or just my own blind spots that I didn't see in terms of that. And I hope that other men pick up the book and can reflect on their own involvement as well. And that's really, to me, I want women to pick up the book and see themselves reflected and represented and to hear those stories. But I also want men to pick it up and think about the fact that they never had to deal with many of these things and that they played a role in it, whether it was just by being silent or actively working against women being there. And I think we're just in a time where, for all that negativity that's out there about women's hockey, we need to challenge that with celebration. And
Mhm.
we also need to recognize that when some people, myself included, I guess, when we challenge things that are going on in the PWHL, when we challenge the rules that are there, the treatment of women in the teams and the organizations, that's happening to make sure that these past systems can't repeat themselves and that the women are spoken, have a voice that can be out there without risk of them losing their careers for speaking out. So
Mhm.
I'm always happy to share those stories and to challenge things and to have those conversations. But it's all part of, in my opinion, of kind of working towards this brighter future still.
Yeah, that's I hope that you're right. And definitely this is important work. I'm hoping I contribute to it as well by just helping talk about women's hockey and celebrating, like you said, the athletes and the people that are in the game are just truly amazing. And like you said, for men to maybe look into it and realize that it's pretty darn good hockey, and the people are amazing. I mean, I don't know how many doctors and firefighters and people of high, caliber careers on the outside of hockey because they had to, but oh, they didn't just become, you know, not that just, but I mean, these are very, very high achieving people, and there's so much to celebrate about that, and including, the stars that go to the Olympics and the tournaments, but even the fourth liners that are toiling away are amazing and deserve all of our respect for being part of this. Well, just one more personal question, kind of before I let you go. But you mentioned that you coached women's or girls hockey, high school hockey, I think it was, or high
Yeah.
school age. And so, what is it that it sounds like you had a bit of an awakening. I know you looked up some history, and maybe we can leave that for the book as a teaser. There's a very specific reason why Ian kind of found out that there was something right under his very nose in his hometown that he was like, well, maybe there's more I better look into. But uh, and by the way, don't forget to order your book on Amazon or online at the publisher's site. Why don't you tell us that before I ask you this quick question, so we won't lose anybody if I'm asking this. But where can they find the book or order it in time for Christmas or holiday giving?
Well, hopefully, with the Canadian Post thing resolved, you can still get it from my publishing company, which is tidewaterpress.ca. But Amazon, you can get them overnight. Chapters or Indigo, you can get them quickly as well. So there's plenty of places. If you Google the book online, you're going to find hundreds of different purchasing options, and most of them we're still have time before, Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate in the holiday season, or just because you want a good book for the cold winter nights. And
Yeah.
but yeah, you can get it everywhere. So just go and look and it'll be there, definitely. But yeah, I hope that people do find that story interesting about some of the personal connections and things that I had no idea about. And that's something I was embarrassed about, was the lack of knowledge I had. So hopefully the rest of the hockey world can pick it up and see some stories that they had no idea existed either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm reminded of, everybody loves the Bill Barilko story and some of those, legends of the NHL. And these are the kind of stories that are in this book, like kind of amazing and like, what? How can that happen? Just something you can tuck away and maybe might come to your mind when you are watching the newer league here, and just remember, like, well, that person was the person that started that, or these things came out of women that really led the way. And I love the subtitle, The Relentless Pursuit of the Puck. It's just it's a great metaphor and tells us a lot about what it took to have women's hockey take its rightful place. But just quickly, so yourself, like, how did you move into strictly covering women's hockey? What were the pieces of the puzzle that came together, and why are you still doing it when obviously you probably could write about other things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I love women's hockey. I think that's the biggest thing. Coaching it myself for years was really a crucial part of that. I'd open the local newspaper and see stories about all these boys hockey teams, and um, even myself growing up, we'd get lots of coverage, but I never really read any about women's hockey, and that just felt so wrong. And but I also kind of got tired of men's hockey and the all that toxic masculinity and the issues that are ongoing, whether it's the Hockey Canada scandals or I was covering that for so long that it was I saw that there was no end in sight to this. And there's definitely importance in doing that work, but at some point I thought, I want to celebrate something good too. And I loved women's hockey at the time and was attending lots of PHF and PWHPA and World Championships and doing those big events. And actually sitting at the 2023 World Championships in Brampton, talking to some other media. I was like, we've got people that are covering the sport well, women's hockey well. but we don't have this every single day, comprehensive, robust coverage where every game has a story, where the games are not just, it's not just a box score, but we're analyzing what's happening. We're talking about prospects. We're looking at U18 tournaments. We're trying to follow who the best players outside of North America are so that we can celebrate hockey, women's hockey, all across the globe because we're not going to get there in terms of building a media landscape unless we do it holistically. And so at that point, I sent an email and said I would like to start this women's branch or site under the Hockey News' umbrella. They were at the time starting up NHL team sites. And so I got a yes, which was exciting. And by the end of that tournament, we had actually published our first ever stories. Were about the bronze medal games at the 2023 World Championships. So at that point, I said goodbye to covering any kind of men's hockey for whether it was the magazine or online, and just threw my whole writing career and all of my passion for it into women's hockey. And I'm really glad I did because we're already seeing so much more media surrounding the game, and we really need a lot of people to talk about the game to open things up. But yeah, did I? I think a lot of people jump into women's hockey thinking that it's a stepping stone for men's hockey coverage and media, and there's nothing that ticks me off more than that. And I went the other way, and I've never felt better about a decision. I've never enjoyed covering the sport as much as I have since doing that. I feel revitalized in my own enjoyment of hockey. And I've met just so many nice people, and the women's hockey community can really envelop you and pull you in and welcome you. And it's just been great that, I mean, I still get followed by the negative trolls online and things like that. And there's still people that don't want me to write about women's hockey either. And I get that. But hopefully, by doing this, the doors open more and there's um, more journalists, young people coming out of university, more women that pick up the idea and want to get involved and start writing about this. And hopefully I'm a thing of the past at some point. And there's lots of other, young writers that come in and um, my end goal would be I would love to see an all women staff of the Hockey News Women's taking over and really running this thing and telling stories. And hopefully I was just a blip on the radar in that process, but hopefully there's some kind of impact there as well.
Yeah, well, you're modest, of course, and uh, I can't help agreeing because I do contribute, but you know, anything and everything that you want to know about women's hockey is on the site somewhere. And if it isn't, you can always submit a question through the roundtable. And, I think it's nothing but positive that you're there representing a very specific kind of person who celebrates and appreciates and is willing to kind of take their knocks and give out some knocks and tell it like it is. These are all, as you said, parts of making women's hockey just a more organic, authentic part of.
Well, it's important that you're there too. I mean, what other outlet has people in Toronto, in Montreal, in Boston, in New York, covering uh, in the actual arena, standing at practices and talking to people? That's the work that people like yourself are doing through the Hockey News Women's. I mean, it has never existed in women's hockey before. This is groundbreaking stuff that we have quote unquote beat reporters in every market, doing that work. That's something that just has never existed. And I'm so glad that there's people like yourself that decided that you wanted to jump on board and do that because we can't tell that depth of stories without
Yeah.
people being in the rinks and seeing the little nuances and talking to the coaches and players. So thank you in return for that.
Thank you. And it's just such a joy. Like I can't even put into words how much it's meant to me. And like you said, being there in person and just being a hockey fan and getting the privilege of seeing these athletes compete and then finding out that they're even better people off the ice and the way they stand up for each other and for the sport and are willing to, represent the league and participate with fans. it's not that hard to give up watching the NHL once you kind of immerse yourself in this, whether other people find that to be true or not. That's what I found. Just
Is the NHL playing right now?
as
Do they
far
have
as yeah,
they have
yeah,
a season?
I
I can't
think,
remember. So
yeah, I think there's some team
they got
there
to
in
be doing
Toronto.
something. Yeah. There's a Toronto team somewhere, I
Pretty
think.
sure Toronto has a
Yeah.
team, and
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know, but we're more concerned with the Scepters, the Victoire, and the other teams. It's amazing hockey. This is a great time to get involved, and hopefully, this podcast and everything that I'm working on can be a small part of it. And what you're doing with your time is a huge part of it. So thank you again, and we'll just mention the title of the book, Ice in Their Veins, Women's Relentless Pursuit of the Puck. And it's on Tidewater Press. And it's a great read if you're just curious, like of some of the names that you might have missed. There are so many people who made all of this happen, and we wouldn't be where we are without them. So thank you for writing the book, Ian, and thanks for joining us today to talk about it.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.